A few years ago, during a train journey, I sat next to a friendly Asian couple from Warsaw. When they found out that I work in cybersecurity, the woman's eyes lit up. She told me about an incident that happened a few weeks earlier when she received a phone call. She said it was a recorded message, but in Chinese. She didn't understand what the person was saying and hung up. She shook her head in frustration and mentioned that she doesn't speak Chinese, as some phishing attacks target specific groups of people who speak a particular language. In this case, the attack was unsuccessful because the woman didn't understand Chinese. If she had spoken Chinese, the attack might have had a chance to succeed. We have already discussed the dangers of phishing via email. Some of you may be highly skilled at recognizing phishing attempts, but nowadays, phishing is not limited to emails alone. Vishing is a type of phishing attack based on voice messages. It can be more difficult to organize than email-based phishing attacks, but it remains effective for those of us who answer calls from unknown numbers. I used to work as a network analyst at a telecommunications company. We would receive calls from customers to help them with network-related issues. One day, I received a very interesting call from a man named Marion. Marion told me that he was the director of a team I hadn't previously worked with. He had a British accent and claimed to work at our Warsaw office. He explained that he was in a hurry to attend a meeting at our Krakow location, but his luggage had been stolen on the train. He said that his work laptop and phone were in the luggage. He was calling to contact another director and inform him that he would be late. When I offered to pass on the message, Marion said he had other matters to discuss with that person and needed to speak with him directly. At that moment, I was fully focused on problem solving. I looked up the person I needed to contact in our company directory and prepared to transfer the call. Just before connecting the call, my suspicions wouldn't let me rest, so I asked Marion to wait a moment. I sent a message to the person Marion wanted to contact, asking if they were expecting to meet someone with that name that day. The director told me that he was indeed supposed to meet Marion that day, but he then informed me that Marion was standing right next to him. I was shocked. The director then told me to ask the fake Marion about his wife's name as a way to verify who he was. I asked, and the fake Marion replied, "Why would he ask me that?" Strange. Well, I'll try to contact him another way, and then hung up. Sometimes, phishing calls are made by a real person, like in my encounter with the fake Marion. Other times, phishing calls are made using recorded messages, asking for information, or requesting a callback, as was the case with the Asian couple. A common telephone scam involves someone impersonating a tax authority and demanding payment for various reasons. In reality, government agencies do not call, send SMS messages, or emails requesting money, so such calls are always scams. You might be thinking that you are safe as long as you answer only calls from known numbers. Unfortunately, caller ID can also be spoofed. Spoofing is the process of changing the caller identification information to appear as a different number than the original. It might look like your mother is calling, but it could be someone else. Later in this course, we will discuss various ways you can protect yourself when answering the phone. Once I had a conversation with my friend about a healthy lifestyle change I wanted to implement. My friend praised a woman on Instagram who had lots of useful tips regarding this lifestyle change. He sent me her profile, and I immediately followed her. A few days later, I received a follow request from that woman. I was surprised because she had thousands of followers and didn't follow many people. The next day, I received a message from her that simply said, "Hey, can we talk?" At that point, my slight suspicion turned into full suspicion. I checked the Instagram username again to make sure I was talking to the right person. Although the usernames were similar, the one I received the message from had an extra O in the name. When I visited the profile of the fake account, the follow account was different, even though the bio and the grid of photos looked identical. This was a very common scam on social media. I immediately blocked that account, but other similar accounts kept sending me similar messages until I stopped following the real account. This is a tactic used by attackers to operate under the umbrella of trust that popular accounts have built with their followers. Do you remember the halo effect we talked about? Social media has taken the world by storm over the past decade, connecting us with people worldwide and providing platforms for us and our businesses. Unfortunately, it also gives attackers the opportunity to gather more information about us and a different way to deceive victims into doing or sharing things they wouldn't normally do. Using social media in this way is called social media phishing. Social media platforms are excellent places to collect information about people. For example, birthday posts often contain details about a person's age, as well as answers to security questions like the name of a pet. There are even challenges or games on social platforms, such as Facebook, like Find Out What Kind of Pizza You Are, which are really designed to gather as much information about you as possible. Seemingly innocent, this information can be exploited by attackers to answer security questions. Some attackers even use LinkedIn to gather information about targets. It's not uncommon to find phone numbers and addresses in CVs shared on LinkedIn, which can be used for recruitment or other malicious purposes. In some social media phishing attacks, like the one I described at the beginning of this story, impersonation is heavily exploited. Impersonation involves pretending to be someone else, allowing the attacker to appear more innocent and potentially lowering the victim's guard. Similarly, catfishing is a type of impersonation aimed at establishing romantic contact. It can be used in social media phishing. The victim might get involved in a relationship with a hacker and be convinced of many things because of the trust that has been built. Some social media phishing attacks are less obvious. When I'm on Facebook, I see a friend posting a quiz they filled out using an external service. Honestly, it's always a bit tempting for me. Who wouldn't want to know which Hogwarts house they belong to? However, some of these external apps ask for access to your Facebook account or other personal information before providing results. This is a way to encourage you to interact with the quiz and share your information. It's not always clear to users how this information might be used, but it can be exploited in various ways. In the early days of social media, I remember the emphasis on adding as many people as possible to your network. Having more followers or connections seemed to indicate greater popularity. Few realized that not all followers or connections had good intentions. That's why it's important to be more selective about who you add to your social networks. If you don't know the person requesting to follow you, and the person isn't connected to anyone you know, declining to add them to your contacts may be the better choice. Sending mass emails to random people may yield some results, but general emails do not always hit the target. To increase the potential gains from a phishing attack and improve its effectiveness, it is much better to be more precise. Some attacks target a specific organization, department, or employee within a company. This type of attack is called spear phishing. If the target is a senior employee, such an attack is referred to as whaling, because it involves a big fish. Why is it important to be more precise in selecting targets? As I mentioned earlier, the more time and effort invested in such an attack, the higher its potential rewards. If an attacker sends an email to Anna, a student with limited resources, they might threaten her severely, but the success of the attack may not bring high gains. However, if the target is the CFO of an organization or the head of the finance department, a successful attack becomes much more profitable. Achieving this only requires a bit more effort and strategic planning in how the attack appears. Just like a cover letter, spear phishing attacks are designed to match the needs of the target group. The attacker usually spends some time developing a convincing pretext which forms the basis of the attack. A pretext is a story or scenario that the victim is likely to be susceptible to. To craft a compelling pretext, a hacker uses information gathered from open sources, known as OSINT. OSINT includes any publicly available information on the Internet, social media posts, photos, online articles, anything that can be found via Google. Once the target is identified, the hacker can use this information to create a convincing phishing attack. There are several ways this can be done. It could be an email that appears to come from someone close to the target, such as a boss or a leader within the organization. I have seen many such cases in my work. For example, once an email was sent to the secretary of one of the directors at the company I worked for. The first email simply said, "Hi, are you available?" and looked like a message from the CEO. After a few email exchanges, the CEO asked for the purchase of 20 gift cards from Allegro and the sending of the codes. The only thing that prevented this attack from succeeding was the awareness that such a scenario had already occurred in the company where a colleague of the secretary worked. CEOs are often impersonated in phishing attacks because of the authority they carry. In some traditional corporate cultures, it is rarely questioned when top executives give instructions. If the CEO asks if you're available and requests something unusual, you are more likely to comply. Another example of a spear phishing attack could be a phone call from someone you might know but do not recognize. In a discussion about Vishing, I explained how a hacker impersonated a person I could confirm as important, but I had no way to verify their identity, at least that's what the hacker thought. A good method to combat spear phishing and whaling is vigilance. It's important to pay attention to how people contact you and how they communicate. If you've never communicated with your boss via email but receive a suspicious message from the CEO, try to verify the information through your usual communication channels. Smishing, or SMS phishing, is a form of phishing that occurs through text messages. What does such an attack look like? Similar to other phishing attacks, smishing attempts may try to entice you to click on a link or download something onto your device. Like many people, I receive many emails. Sometimes I overlook something. That's why, for very important matters, I like to enable SMS notifications whenever possible. It's not uncommon for me to get text messages informing me about a package or a processed payment. As you can imagine, there are smishing scams that look like such notifications. The difference, of course, lies in the links attached to these text messages and where they lead. It works similarly to emails from Allegro, which I mentioned in previous videos. Other examples of smishing may include messages from government institutions or requests to fill out a survey with a reward in the form of a shopping voucher. Sometimes, smishing can come from a number that seems familiar or is already in your contacts. This is known as spoofing. It's the same as caller ID spoofing that we discussed in the previous video, but in text form. The attacker changes the sender information to deceive you and make you think that the message comes from someone or something you are more familiar with. The goal of smishing attacks is the same as other phishing attacks: to obtain authentication data, deliver information, or download malicious software onto your device. Sometimes, a text message contains a link that leads to a website trying to install malware on your phone or collect your login credentials. Phishing doesn't always require your interaction. There are malicious software programs that do not require any user interaction. In 2019, there was an attack related to the WhatsApp application, in which an exploit, in short, malicious software exploiting security vulnerabilities, was delivered via missed calls. In this attack, the hacker called the victim, and the malicious software was installed after answering the call. The victim did not need to interact with the call at all, making this attack difficult to detect. No one can block incoming calls, so the attack was effective. The same applies to non-interaction attacks originating from phishing campaigns. Non-interaction or no-click attacks often exploit vulnerabilities or unknown weaknesses in software, including Apple and Android systems. People tend to think that our phones cannot have malware, but they can. That's why it's important to take steps to protect yourself. First, keep your devices up to date and ensure updates are installed automatically. Second, avoid clicking on links or calling numbers sent via text messages unless you can verify the number or sender. It's best to look up the number on Google and see what comes up. At this point, I have already discussed phishing via email, phone, social media, and text messages. There are many methods of phishing that cannot be covered in this course. But before we move on, I would like to draw your attention to other phishing techniques you may encounter in the future. In traditional phishing, bait is used as a lure. The same principle applies in phishing, which we discuss in this course, but there are certain phishing attacks that do not require the use of bait. An example of this is the so-called pharming. Pharming does not require bait because either you are already vulnerable to bait at this moment, or it has been done without any action on your part. Pharming occurs when malicious software that redirects people to malicious websites is installed on a computer or server. Sometimes, pharming is carried out by modifying the host's file on a computer. Hosts' files exist for many good reasons, such as troubleshooting connection issues for web applications. Of course, what can be used for good purposes can also be exploited for malicious intent. Another way of conducting pharming is by infecting a DNS server. The main difference is that one occurs on a machine you control, while the other happens on a server you do not control. If you notice that a website looks strange, a good way to check whether the problem is with your device is to visit the same site using your phone's mobile data network. If the site appears different on your phone and uses a secure connection, but not on your computer, you may have fallen victim to pharming. Antivirus and anti-malware software can help detect malicious software on your device. Ensuring that you visit websites with secure connections is also beneficial, along with clearing your browser cache and keeping your computer up to date. Pop-up window phishing was once very common. I remember one time my dad called me in panic because he couldn't access his computer. I can't click anything, and all my files have disappeared. Of course, as an unofficial family tech support, I immediately went to see what was going on. On his computer, malware was making his desktop look completely empty, and a pop-up window kept prompting him to update, while simultaneously preventing the actual update of the computer. I asked him to describe step by step what he did, and he said he was minding his own business when the pop-up informed him that his computer was outdated and that he needed to update immediately, or a virus would be installed. So he clicked, thinking the issue was resolved. He didn't know that this was only the beginning. I used the System Restore feature on his computer, a Windows function that allows you to revert changes made to the machine. Fortunately, my dad's default settings enabled a quick resolution of the problem. If he hadn't had System Restore enabled, we would have had to wipe the entire computer. Currently, browsers usually have pop-up blockers, but attackers are becoming increasingly creative, using other notification features to send pop-up windows. If you receive a pop-up window while working on your computer, make sure to carefully check the message. Systems generally do not threaten you with viruses when mentioning available updates. If you're concerned, instead of clicking on the pop-up, try to manually check if an update is available. Other tactics used in phishing include URL hijacking and typosquatting. URL hijacking is similar to what we discussed earlier, but instead of installing malicious software, it involves registering a legitimate domain or doing it through typosquatting. Typosquatting occurs when a popular or legitimate URL is cloned and subtly modified, usually by adding an extra character that looks very similar to the original URL. I shared an example of this in a social media phishing video, but I wanted to explore this topic in more depth. About 95% of brain activity is subconscious, and attackers put significant effort into creating phishing attacks that do not trigger conscious thoughts. One way is by making subtle changes to URLs and hoping you won't notice. For example, replacing the letter W with two V's to make it look like W. For most of these examples, having antivirus or anti-malware software on your device is crucial. Also, ensure your device and browsers are up to date, and manually type links whenever possible or when messages seem suspicious. Although more phishing sites now display secure connections when visited, it is still worth checking whether the connection is genuinely secure. Look for a padlock icon in the address bar next to the URL. Clicking on this icon can also provide more information about the certificate owner used by the website.